Today marks 69 days since Nancy Guthrie vanished from her home in Tucson, Arizona. She is 84 years old. She requires daily medication, she has a pacemaker, and as of this broadcast, no law enforcement agency has publicly named a suspect, confirmed her location, or produced proof that she is alive. Investigators from the Pima County Sheriff's Department and the FBI continue to work the case. More than 18,000 tips have been received. A combined reward exceeding $1 million has been offered for information leading to her recovery. It has not been claimed. This week, new developments on multiple fronts, none of them resolving the central question of where Nancy Guthrie is, but each one adding detail to a case that has resisted both resolution and clarity since it began. A forensic profiler who helped establish the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit spoke publicly about a motive theory that has received little serious coverage: the possibility that this abduction was not primarily about money. New Ransom communications arrived at a national media organization, one claiming Nancy is dead, another claiming she was seen alive across the border in Mexico, and separately, reporting confirmed for the first time that the family was prepared to pay the original ransom demand and pulled back only because investigators believed, at the time, that they had a way of tracing whoever was on the other end of those first notes. That effort did not succeed. The original note writer has not communicated since. The ransom deadline passed more than 7 weeks ago. Here is what we know, what experts are saying, and what this investigation has still not publicly answered. Nancy Guthrie was last seen on the evening of January 31st when her son-in-law dropped her off at her home in the Catalina foothills, a gated residential community north of Tucson. Surveillance footage released by the FBI showed a masked, armed individual at her front door at 1:47 in the morning. The doorbell camera was physically disabled. At 2:28, her pacemaker stopped transmitting. Blood confirmed to be hers was found on the front steps. Her phone, purse, and medication were inside. She has not been seen since that morning. The public debate about motive in this case has centered almost entirely on financial gain. A wealthy family, a national media figure, a ransom demand in the millions. That frame is understandable. It is also, according to a forensic expert with decades of direct experience in cases exactly like this one, potentially too narrow. Dr. Ann Burgess worked for years with the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, the division that pioneered the systematic study of violent criminal behavior and developed what we now know as criminal profiling. This week, she spoke publicly about the Nancy Guthrie case and offered a framework that most public analysis has not engaged with directly. She described a category of motive she calls personal cause. In these cases, she explained, the act has specific private meaning to the person committing it. It is not random, and it is not simply opportunistic. It is directed at a particular target or a particular family because of something the perpetrator believes happened to them. A grievance, sometimes years old, a sense of injustice that has never resolved, an anger that, rather than fading with time, becomes more deliberate. She said investigators in cases with this profile should be looking backward, not just at the weeks before the abduction, but at years. She cited cases where the time between a perceived wrong and a violent act stretched 8 to 10 years. The person responsible had waited, had planned, and had finally moved. Her question for anyone working this case: who, across the full arc of this family's life and public visibility, is carrying something? Who suffered a loss, a professional consequence, a personal blow that they believe connects to someone close to Nancy Guthrie? She also raised a specific concern about the ransom demand. She said it is possible, not confirmed, but analytically possible, that the Bitcoin demand was designed to redirect investigators, to make a personal act look like a financial crime, to send law enforcement toward cryptocurrency wallets and blockchain analysis while the actual motive pointed somewhere else. This week's reporting gives that theory additional texture. According to information confirmed for the first time, the FBI assessed the original 2 ransom notes as likely authentic communications from the actual abductors. The family was prepared to pay the $6 million demanded. They held back because investigators believed they had a method of tracing the Bitcoin wallet. A small amount was reportedly deposited into the account as part of that effort. The trace did not work. The note writer went silent. No follow-up, no proof of life, no new demand. If the money was genuinely the goal, silence after a failed trace is an unusual choice. People who want ransom money typically find another way to press for payment. They do not disappear. The ransom picture has grown more complicated this week. A second, separate source, an individual not claiming to be the abductor but claiming to have knowledge of who is responsible, has now sent at least 4 communications to a national media organization over the course of several weeks. This week, 2 additional notes arrived from that source on the same day Savannah Guthrie returned to her anchor desk for the first time since her mother's disappearance. One note claimed that Nancy Guthrie is dead. A second note claimed the sender had witnessed her alive in the Mexican state of Sonora. The organization receiving those notes has forwarded them to the FBI. Law enforcement has not confirmed or denied their authenticity. Publicly, there has been no statement. What analysts have noted is a detail embedded in the earlier communications from this same source. In one message, the sender wrote that time was of the essence. The next day, from the same sender, came a follow-up stating that time was no longer of the essence. That reversal is unusual for a straightforward scam attempt. People running information scams in high-profile cases typically maintain urgency. They do not walk it back. Whether that detail points to something genuine or something more strategically constructed remains publicly unresolved. The border theory has run through this case since the first week. On February 10th, the same day the FBI released the doorbell camera footage, a search operation was conducted in Rio Rico, Arizona, approximately 60 miles south of Tucson and 10 miles from the U.S.-Mexico border crossing at Nogales. A person of interest was detained during a traffic stop in that area and later released after investigators determined he was not connected to the case. No law enforcement agency has confirmed that Nancy Guthrie was taken across the border. The note claiming a sighting in Sonora has not been authenticated, but the geographic pattern of the investigation, moving south toward the border on the first full day of active public searching, has not been fully explained. Investigators do not conduct major operations 60 miles from a crime scene without a reason. 2 investigative failures have now been cited this week by professionals who have followed this case closely and who have direct experience in the tools that were and were not used. The first involves detection dogs. A retired lieutenant from the Nassau County Police Department, one of the founding members of the NYPD's K-9 unit, spoke directly about the sheriff's early decision to place canine detection teams on hold rather than deploying them immediately. He said that decision was inexplicable. He said detection dogs are scientific instruments recognized by courts as capable of establishing probable cause. They identify biological material at the molecular level. They operate at night, in desert terrain, in conditions that defeat every other search method available to investigators. He said the absence of these teams in the early days of the Guthrie search represented a concrete investigative loss. Evidence that might have been located in the first 48 to 72 hours, a hair, a clothing fragment, biological material along an exit route, was not searched for using the most effective tool available for that purpose. He said that even now, at day 69, a grid search using detection dogs in the areas surrounding Nancy's home could still produce results, particularly if this is, as he believes, a recovery and not a rescue. Locating physical remains would mean locating a second crime scene, a location with evidence. a chain of physical evidence pointing back toward the person who moved her. The second failure involves the crime scene itself. The home in the Catalina foothills was released back to the family before it had been fully processed by forensic investigators. Pool cleaners and vendors were allowed access before the full evidentiary value of the property had been extracted. The blood on the front steps was noticed not by law enforcement first, but by a reporter. When that discovery forced investigators to return to the property, it had already been walked through by multiple individuals whose presence could complicate evidence attribution. The sheriff has rejected these characterizations. He said this week that he does not believe any mistakes were made. He said attacking his department does not help the investigation. He said his people have devoted extraordinary effort to this case, and that discrediting that effort is harmful. The Pima County Board of Supervisors has issued a formal demand for answers from the sheriff on several matters, including questions about his work history, departmental budget management, and a November 2024 incident in which TSA screeners found a loaded, undeclared firearm in his carry-on bag at Tucson International Airport. He was not charged in that incident. The firearm was secured, and he continued his travel on a later flight. A recall effort against him, driven by community members who feel the initial investigation failed Nancy Guthrie, continues to gather support. Savannah Guthrie returned to her broadcast desk on Monday. She said it was good to be home. She moved through the news of the day. She held her composure, as she has been trained to do, and as she does, because anything else would cost her something she may not be able to recover in front of an audience of millions. What she is carrying is not visible in that broadcast. What her family has lived through over the past 69 days is not visible in the headlines. The private weight of a case with no resolution, no suspect, and no confirmed answer to the one question that matters, where is she, does not compress into a broadcast format. The investigation continues. The DNA analysis from inside the home is at the center of a forensic effort that genetic experts describe as the most promising remaining pathway toward a name. A mixed sample containing material that may belong to whoever entered that house is being processed using new deconvolution software that private companies and university researchers have been accelerating specifically because of this case. Whether that technology produces a usable profile, and on what timeline, has not been publicly confirmed. The Bitcoin wallets connected to the ransom demand remain under analysis by federal cryptocurrency forensics teams. Every blockchain transaction is permanently recorded. If the wallet has been touched, through an exchange, through conversion, through any transfer that created a traceable link, that record exists. Whether it has been found, investigators have not said. The $1 million reward from the Guthrie family remains unclaimed. $50,000 federal reward remains unclaimed. 18,000 tips have been received and evaluated. None has produced a named suspect. Nancy Guthrie has been missing for 69 days. She is 84 years old. She built a life in Tucson spanning more than 5 decades, raised 3 children after losing her husband at 49, and, according to everyone who knew her, was precisely the kind of person for whom this should never have been possible. Anyone with information about her disappearance is asked to contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI or submit tips anonymously at tips.fbi.gov. The family's reward remains active. The investigation remains open. The answer is still out there.